by lizard aliens.
Well, that's not all. Former British TV sports presenter David Icke is telling the audience on his Aussie tour that he believes the moon is a gigantic spacecraft and 9/11 was a conspiracy theory. David joins us now. David, good morning to you.
Good morning. You know why they're doing it? Because they've got a mind of their own and they've taken the self-respect to look at the detail and then think, that makes some sense, I'm going to know more. That's why. They're intelligent people.
Hey everybody, welcome back to a special Liquid Lunch. It's me, Hugh. We've got Bridget here, we've got Guy, came in all the way from Quebec, and we've got David Icke joining us here in downtown Toronto. And David, you're here in Canada, you finally made it.
Yeah.
I guess there was some issues getting into the country. Do you want
Issues? Yes, I have issues. Yeah, this is the first time I've actually been allowed into the country to speak since 2002. When a speaking tour was destroyed by being told I didn't have the right visa. And all these years later, we now learn that I did, because I've come in this time on the same visa. So actually they were lying to me. I hope it was something I said. I'd be very disappointed if it wasn't. It's going to be very interesting to speak here after all this time, because I've found Canadians to be, many Canadians to be very open people. But the government and the administration is frankly a global disgrace in terms of its suppression of information and suppression of freedom of expression. Or that's been my experience over the decades that I've been doing what I do. And what I kind of experienced in Canada in the late 1990s, early 2000s, is now spread, not out of Canada, from other locations. It's now spread to the point where, as we sit here today, the basic human right of freedom of speech, freedom of opinion, freedom of expression is, well, the system is at war with it. Mm-hmm. And you know the great irony, because when you break down human control, it's all psychological. Because when you're dealing with 7.5 billion people, and those that are seeking to impose their will upon that vast number are very few, tiny by comparison, you can't do it physically. You can do it in small areas physically, but what you have to do is hijack perception. And there's a very sophisticated psychological game going on in which those that claim, for instance, to be anti-fascist and anti-hate are protesting with hate on their faces against hate.
Well, they're tearing down statues
Yeah.
and stuff like that, and you know, you just don't do that.
Yeah, and basically what we've got is an inversion, because if you want to take people's freedom of speech away and their basic freedoms away, and you don't want to make it too obvious until you're far enough down the line that the game's almost complete, then you don't do it through a guy with a tiny moustache goose-stepping down the street with his arm in the air, because someone might notice, hey, we're in a fascist state. Look, So you do it, this is what the inversion is, you do it through people who claim to be anti-fascist, who claim to be what they call progressive, but I mean progressive and liberal is not the same thing. I'm a liberal, and what they call progressives claim to be liberals, but they're not. They're actually the opposite. So a liberal believes, not a political liberal, I mean a liberal person or perception, believes in maximum freedom of expression, freedom of lifestyle, freedom of everything. The progressive, fake liberals do not. They're the ones behind political correctness, which is nothing more than George Orwell's Newspeak, which is political correctness is simply a massive scam to persuade the target population to silence the target population. That's what political correctness is. And what we're having now, and I saw this psychological game so clear over the Charlottesville situation. They're now saying that what they call the far left, you see, I look at political extremes, white supremacism and neo-Nazis and the far left, violent far left. And I don't see two polarities. I see the same mentality with two different labels, because they're the same to me, mirrors of each other. But what they were saying and attacking over the Charlottesville situation was that anyone said, actually, there was violence on both sides, which there demonstrably was. It's caught on film. They were knocking the crap out of each other. No, only one side was responsible, and that was the far right, the white supremacists. And where the psychological game comes in is that if you look at the way it's portrayed, they say the far right, they were protesting again for freedom of speech. The far left were protesting against hatred. So what you've done psychologically now is you've tagged a desire for freedom of speech to the extreme right. So anyone else comes along who is as far from extreme right as you could get, like me, saying we should have freedom of speech, you're far right. It's all a psychological game, which is, once you get the way it's played, it's very easy to see. And we are in a very pivotal time, now, because unless we realize what the game is, and we grow some backbone, and we look this system in the eye and wait for it to blink, then what we call freedom of expression, that people of our age will have some recollection of, will be no more, because it's moving so fast because of a simple process. The more you destroy freedom of speech, the more you silence the challenging and exposure of the destruction of freedom of speech. So that starts to move faster and faster and faster. And so this is the time to stand up and speak louder, not be silenced, because the greatest form of censorship and the greatest destroyer of freedom of expression, of freedom of any kind, is self-censorship. And that's what the idea of intimidation is. See, if you go on to social media and suddenly you get a Twitter storm, and especially they want celebrities. The more they can do this to celebrities, the better. Because what it's saying is, this is what happens when you step out of our line. So what people do, journalists are doing it all the time, and more people in general are doing it all the time, not least through political correctness, is they're going through the mental gymnastics of saying, instead of being spontaneous and speaking their natural truth, they go through this mental gymnastics. What don't I say? How do I say it? And eventually you go into a point of self-censorship where there is literally no need for a censor anymore, because people are just intimidated into only staying within the realms of acceptability. And I've just finished a book, which is coming out in November, which goes so far beyond the so-called borders of acceptability in this tyranny that I'm afraid, you know, they're going to have to be sipping sweet tea on quite a level when they read it, because this is not a time to walk backwards. This is not a time to be intimidated. This is a time to turn this on itself.
No, I just want to ask you what that book's all about. But sometimes I think that some of the desire for politically correct speaking comes from, like, you know, you can express certain thoughts diplomatically in a way that is it's you know, sometimes really honing in on the message you want to get out there. If you're using, say, spontaneous speaking without thinking too much about it, you can offend people that you don't want to offend, and your purpose is not to offend. Your purpose is to make a point and let the people that might otherwise even be offended get it.
Right. Well, I've got a foolproof method of overcoming the problem of people being offended. I'll say to them, choose not to be. Choose not to be.
But sometimes, I mean, some people are, when they do speak, I think it's really important to define. There's a line where you're crossing into what could be hate speech, like real hate speech.
Well, you see, once you start to define what can be said and what cannot be said, you are then creating a situation where someone's deciding that. And who is it deciding that? On what criteria? We should surely, instead of having creating a massive snowflake generation that is upset and offended by everything, why? Because they're told to be. It's to encourage people to be so strong and empowered in and of themselves that they're not offended, right? Okay, you know, someone says something to me, and if anyone should be offended, it should be me in the last nearly 30 years, the abuse I've had. I'm not offended at all. But if someone says something that someone would accept to be offended by, I might go into some emotional trauma. Oh, you can't say that. Or I can say, dickhead. Right, now let's get on with our lives, right? And I have no emotional trauma, I have no emotional consequence, because what the person has said to me has not had an effect on me. Why? Nothing to do with him or her, the way I've received it. And we have a generation now which has been systematically manipulated to be offended over everything. Because I was born in the 1950s, you know, we've been here a few years, Guy. Because I was born in the 50s, you know, I have a compass, not because I'm special, but because I've lived a while. I have a compass. I can see what it was like before to what it's like now. You imagine this, and I have great understanding for the young generations that have fallen for this, and many in the young generation haven't, by the way. Because if you're born, when you're born into the world, you tend to think the world you're born into is how things are. Because why? They're your norm, you're normal. And then from that inherited sense of normal, you then use that as a compass for the world. And so, for instance, cameras and fingerprint technology and all this stuff in schools, it's now the norm to young people. This is how it is. To me, it's outrageous in terms of how different it is to when I went to school. So you have this compass. And one of the reasons, and it's a key reason, and you've mentioned it really, in terms of the statues. Why is it that when the United States military go into a country like Iraq, that the museums are destroyed, the great artifacts that define that country's history and that region's history are destroyed? When ISIS take over a country or area of a country like Iraq and like Syria, what do? They destroy. I mean, they're supposed to be Muslims, aren't they? They destroy ancient mosques. They destroy ancient temples and centers of ancient civilization in that area. They're destroying history. And what this whole thing in America is about is destroying history. It's not saying history was good or the history was bad. They're destroying history. Mm-hmm. And as Orwell said in 1984, he who controls the past controls the present, and he who controls the present controls the writing of the past and the perception of the past. And so if you are in the present and you destroy someone's history or sense of history, then you're basically creating a blank sheet of paper on which you can create another version of everything, because you're not being challenged by things that have happened in the past. You've got a blank sheet of paper. And this is why there is a war on history as well as a war on freedom of speech. The two are completely connected. But if you don't look at the world as a tapestry, as a forest, and you only perceive the twigs, you're never going to see what's going on. All you can see is the twigs. You can't see the forest, and that's why most people don't understand what's going on in the world, because they never look at it from the context of connection. They only see in and of themselves happenings and what have you.
So let's try to put our finger on it. What is going on? Like, let's see if we can really just nail it down in the next 45 minutes or so.
What's going on? Okay, well, you can look at the world and you can see it as a series of random events orchestrated by random people in random situations, and that world will be totally confusing. People will say, why did they do it like that? Why don't they do it like that? Why did they do it like that? It's obvious what's going to happen. And it becomes a mass of happenings and situations that seem to have no meaning, no reason. It's all chaos. But if you look at it from another point of view, that there is a force at work which is seeking to centralize power to such an extent on a global level that literally a few people can then dictate world events in fine detail, then you start to see it from a point of view that they're not random events. Of course there are things happen that are not connected to that, but the fundamental things which control the direction of human society in a particular direction, which is very clear, they're not random, they're orchestrated. Because if you look at what's happened, if there's a few of you, and in terms of this inner core, it's very few compared with the global population, then you have to centralize decision making. The more diversity of decision making there is, the less control any few can have over it. There's just too many points of decision making. You have to incessantly centralize them. And the more you centralize them, the more power the few have over the many. So, there was a time when humans organized themselves in a situation of tribes. Compared with now, a relatively few people deciding what happened with a relatively few people. There then came a point where loads and loads of these tribes were brought together in what we call nations. And now one central point is dictating to all the former tribes in the nation. Now the few, far fewer, are dictating to far more. In Europe, we now have the European Union, which was the next stage of this totally orchestrated plan, where you bring the nations together and centrally dictate to them. Now a few people at the center are dictating to all those nations, each of which are an amalgamation of all those tribes. And the next stage, which is what I've been warning about for nearly 30 years, and they're now openly talking about, is to have a world government when a few people will be dictating to all those super states, which dictate to all those countries which are made up of all those former tribes. And by the time we reach that point, the number of people dictating world events to 7.5 currently, billion people, will be so tiny, it will be almost laughable if it wasn't so tragic. And you add in then these trade agreements, which are the centralization of power into corporations over governments. And then you look at the banking system, which dictates the choice of the 7.5 billion. How many people, when they get up in the morning, do you really want to do what you've got to do today? Well, no, anything but. Why don't you do what you want to do? I ain't got the money, mate. So the banking system and the control of money is fundamental to dictating choice. And we have the illusion of choice, of course, because if you want a bagel, you've got endless bloody bagels. Oh, we live in a society of choice. Look at all these bagels. Look at all these coffees. How about governments? Oh, you've got this party, that party, sometimes three, but that's about it, right? It's an illusion of choice. It's a joke. Now, what if, and I say it's more than what if, the same network controls governments, controls the banking system, controls the major corporations, owns the media, owns Google, owns Facebook, owns YouTube. And we've got a situation now, if you look at it from a communication point of view, and in the end it's all about communication, because people's behavior and perceptions come from information received. You control information, you're controlling perception, perception controls behavior. It controls what you'll do, what you won't do, what you'll accept, what you won't accept, what you'll challenge, what you won't challenge. So perception is all, for many reasons, even deep into the esoteric. It's fundamentally important, perception to how what people manifest in their lives. We now have a situation where a literal handful of internet giants, ultimately controlled by the same network, like Google, are deciding what information people will have access to and what they won't. They've just literally come out very recently, Google, YouTube, and said we're basically going to suppress conspiracy theories. And you've got the same happening with Facebook. And there is a war on alternative information outside of the norm that the system wants people to believe, and that censorship is now in the hands of a ludicrously few people. And this has been the process of step by step by step, because it's a simple equation. The more you centralize power, the more power you have at the center to centralize even quicker and quicker and quicker. So now we have a situation where Google and Facebook and YouTube, owned by Google, have incredible and advancing every day control of the information that people receive. You have Amazon, which now takes $1 for every dollar spent online in the United States, already £4 for every £10 in Britain spent online. They are destroying and already have destroyed vast swathes of the alternative book industry by their methods. And now they've moved into vast areas of retail where even giant supermarkets that ate up the smaller shops of before, they're now being, their market is being eaten up by Amazon. It's in our face what's going on. And the suppression of freedom of speech is because it's so in our face, so documentable, that the only way they're going to stop it coming out and people seeing it is by silencing those who have seen it already.
Now, I gotta say that we've had we're involved in a lot of different areas here at that channel. We talk about a lot of different subject matter. And I have to say we had a group here on Tuesday night talking about Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies and all that kind of decentralized technology that's coming out. And some of the young people involved in cryptocurrencies that I've met are very optimistic that these are world-changing, game-changing technologies. Of course, the money system, the financial system is probably the main tool that really helps people to centralize the power that you're talking about. But if we have these new decentralized technologies, could really pull the rug out from under that. And a lot of young people are very optimistic that that's exactly what's going to happen.
So long as, in the end, the same suspects don't have control of that as well. And this centralization of power is such that it's amazing where things that appear to, in the public arena, as spontaneous actually come from. You know, all this technology of, what do they call, personal assistants? What do they call it? The Apple things, Siri and all these other things. They were created by seed money from an organization called DARPA, which is one of the most sinister, if not the most sinister organization on earth, which is the technological arm of the Pentagon. And what I would say to people, be optimistic, yes. I wouldn't do what I do and spend my life doing what I do and take the abuse that I do if I wasn't optimistic. But we need to be streetwise as well as optimistic. And that means getting informed. And I'll tell you what I see. And this is, again, systematic, because it's a psychological game in the end. If you go onto YouTube, you don't see, for want of a word, spontaneous videos on the page what you go onto. You see videos that are related to your searching history and the kind of videos that you've seen before. You go onto Facebook, same thing. You can see it when, for instance, you will look at an advertisement for something. The next time you go into Facebook or Google, out of nowhere, you are being offered advertisements relating to the one you've looked at.
Or even something you said on your cell phone.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And they're listening to conversations algorithmically, and they are responding to them, which is why people sussed this when they were having conversations about something, and the next time they went on the internet, they were being offered adverts for what they were talking about, right? Where I'm going with this is that in all these different areas, people are not, as before, spontaneously coming across information that is different to their current perception. They're having their current perceptions constantly confirmed. Now, I see this massively in what we call progressives. And you go to the other, well, say extreme, the other label of the same extreme, to the far right, you'll get the same thing. When you go into universities increasingly, and they ban speakers who are going to say something that is different to what their perceptions are, when you have young people demanding safe spaces where no one says anything that might in any conceivable way upset them or challenge their current beliefs, this is the same principle as going into Facebook and Google and YouTube and getting your current perceptions projected back at you. People increasingly are not getting access to information and opinion that is outside their current perception. And therefore, unless we have taken arrogance to a almost unimaginable level, none of us know it all. We don't even nearly know it all. We're sitting here now, and we are perceiving the tiniest fraction of frequency, called visible light, within infinity. And we know it all. You cannot know it all. You cannot begin to know it all. As Socrates said, wisdom is knowing how little we know. And when you come from that perception, wisdom is knowing how little we know, your mind is always open to other possibility. Why? Because you don't know it all. So what we're looking at in this psychological entrapment is people being put into cul-de-sacs of perception everywhere. And they're not bothered what cul-de-sac you're in as long as you're in one. And what this, again, like I say, there's not one dot that doesn't fit to all the rest if you go deep enough. What the destruction of freedom of speech is doing is stopping that discourse between the cul-de-sacs. In fact, it's saying if you're in that cul-de-sac, we're actually shutting the road off. You're not getting out from there. No one's going to hear that anymore. And when you see the scale of it, you see the orchestration and organization of it, it screams at you, this is not random. This is coordinated. This is happening for a reason. And the reason is mass human control, which is leading incessantly to a point where humanity, as we have known humanity, will be no more. Because the human mind, through the brain, will be connected to artificial intelligence, and that artificial intelligence will do for what's left of human intelligence. And that is not me sitting in a darkened room pulling conspiracies out of the ether. I'm just quoting Silicon Valley. That's what they're saying. Well, they're saying it's coming. It's happening before our eyes. And the first major stage of this was to get people, particularly young people, but as many others as possible, addicted to technology, which you hold.
Yeah, I think that's a really big...
This is digital heroin, second stage.
And also, when you're in that, just watch, that's the thing now, more and more people just on their phones rather than on a computer, being productive, creating. They're just consuming. Or
even better than being on a computer, daydreaming. Letting your mind go into infinite forever instead of being focused on a dot. So you only, I mean, I'm on this world speaking tour. I started in June 2016, and I've been all around the world, and everywhere you go, it's digital heroin. That's stage one, brackets achieved. Stage two, because they want to get in the body, is having technology on the body. So that's your Bluetooth, that's your Google Glass, that's your Apple Watch. And now, stage three, they're the wearables from the holdables, next implantables, already happening, get inside the body. And you've got these people in Silicon Valley, which I call the devil's playground, like Ray Kurzweil and Elon Musk, who plays the good cop to Kurzweil's bad cop. Is Elon Musk saying, oh, AI, it could be the end of humanity. Yeah, so why are you opening companies to push it on? What are you doing? Rubbish. It's all a mind game. So the point is, as Kurzweil said, by 2030 and beyond, the process will be underway of connecting the human mind to AI. And these are his words, not mine. As time moves on, more and more thinking will be done by AI until there is nothing left of human thinking. This is where it's all been leading all along. Now, keep coming back to the same thing. If you want to stop that being exposed, you must silence those who are exposing it. And what you do, because there's not many of you, is you get the target population to silence the ones that are trying to alert the target population to what's actually happening. It's like being in a prison cell, and one of the prisoners runs to the door to get out, and all the other prisoners run to stop him.
Oh, those are Canadians. Canadians act like that all the time.
Well, it's not just Canadians. I mean, I've met Canadian people. They'll be coming to the event this week who are seeing it. But all around the world, what you call they are Canadians, they are everywhere.
Yeah.
Because they don't see it. They don't see it because they're looking at dots. They're not looking at pictures.
David, I'm curious. I've got my own reasons why, but why do you think these people are doing this, or why do they need that much control? What is their end objective? What is it in it for them?
Well, this is where we need another 3 hours, and this is why
yeah.
I talk for 10 hours in 4 sections, because there are so many levels to this. You can start at the outside the rabbit hole, and you can look at the world as it is. You can go a little bit in the rabbit hole, and then you're looking at secret societies and manipulating the world as we perceive it. You go deeper in the rabbit hole and deeper in the rabbit hole, and eventually you reach a force that is not human, and it's not even in this visual frequency band that we experience as the world, and that's where it's coming from. But you know, to connect the dots takes a long, long time. But in the end, humanity is being invaded by an external force, and even those networks that we perceive as human networks, secret societies and all these stuff that I'm talking about, they're not it. It's not where it starts out. They are vehicles for it.
So what is it? Who is it? Like, because most of the people are going to watch this, most of the people that I know, they're aware of all this stuff, but it would be nice to know who the real source of the problem is.
Well, in the end, and again, you know, if I talked in the time we have now, then I'm not going to be able to give the detail and the backup and the supporting evidence. That's why, you know, this new book that I've just finished is something like 720 pages long. Because there's so much information to back up what I'm saying. But in the end, everything is awareness. We can call ourselves white, black, sky blue, pink, Muslim, Jewish, whatever. It's just an experience. It's not who we are. We are awareness. We are that awareness which is having that experience. And what happens is people are manipulated to self-identify with the experience and give it a label and a name. I am Ma, instead of realizing that we are actually the awareness that's having the experience. Everything else is detail. So, awareness. You can have awareness that is loving, that is caring, that is compassionate, that has empathy. And you can have an awareness that's psychopathic. Still an awareness, but in a completely different state of perception, thus behavior, thus desire. And if you take it back beyond the world of form, then what's actually behind this is an extremely distorted, inverted state of awareness, which many ancient peoples talked about, which is dictating human behavior if we fall into its frequency domain. If I feel hatred, if I feel psychopathic tendencies, I am operating at a certain frequency. If I'm feeling love and joy, I'm operating on a completely different frequency. So if you are a distorted state of awareness, then you operate in a certain frequency. If you wish to control another state of awareness, then it has to be in your frequency, or never the twain shall meet. you ain't gonna manipulate people in an expanded state of awareness because they're not on your frequency, because your very state of psychopathic behavior and perception takes you out of that expanded awareness frequency. So what you need to do is to manipulate the reality of the target awareness, in this case humanity as we call it, and you have to manipulate it into your frequency band where you understand that frequency band better than anyone because you spent so much time in it, what we call time. And if you look at the way society is structured, and increasingly so, it's to put people in states of ongoing fear, low vibrational state, ongoing anxiety, almost to the point where anxiety becomes so normal you don't even feel anxious unless you feel really anxious. Just a touch anxious, that's normal. And you play different expressions of that awareness off against itself, which I call phantom self. You make them hate each other, you make them fight each other, you make them seek to impose their will on each other. You create war, you create hunger, you create ongoing ill health that doesn't have to be. And all these things are pulling the target awareness into your frequency band. And once you do that, you start to dictate the target awareness's state of perception, thus behavior, thus everything. And if you strip away form, you strip away names, you strip away all the ludicrous, irrelevant labels we give to awareness, that in its base form is how the human reality is being taken over, by taking over human perception, by pulling human awareness into the perception band of the infiltrator. So we look at, say, extraterrestrials or whatever, still a state of form. We're still looking at what is the awareness that's driving that entity or that group. Is it love? Is it compassion? Is it a desire for everyone to be happy, to be at peace? Or is it the desire to control? Is it the psychopathic desire to control and to hurt and to feed off that energy of hurt, of fear, of anxiety? And that's where I look at everything. You know, when I look at people, whether they're black, white, or whatever, I'm looking at their awareness. And this is another important point. This is vital. What is happening is that this manipulation of human perception, and not least this progressive, political correct nonsense, is designed to a very large extent to get people to think only in groups. So you have, oh, they're coming to get me now. I don't care.
We'll protect you.
I've obviously said something. I've said something wrong. I must have said something right then. So, political correctness cannot look at an individual behaviour and an individual perception, an individual what someone says, what someone does. This is the ultimate non-racial way of looking at the world. In fact, the ultimate way is seeing it all as one consciousness. But let's take it in the world of form. It's the ultimate way of destroying all racism and all inverted racism, which is what I see all the time. Because you're looking at someone and you're not saying, you're that color, you're that religion, you're that culture. You're saying, what are you doing? What are you saying? How are you behaving? I'm going to perceive you from that point of view. Everything else is irrelevant. No. What we have with the non-racists, the anti-racists, are people obsessed with race inversion because they look at a group you might call Muslim, you might call it Jewish, you might call it white American, white men, white women, all these transgender, and you look at a group, and there's a politically correct hierarchy where one group trumps another. And it seems to me from observation that the smaller the minority, the higher they are in the hierarchy of political correctness. Where someone down here, usually a white man, cannot be politically uncorrected against, if you like. It can only politically uncorrect against others. Because people say, you're a white man. No, I'm infinite awareness, having an experience in a body you call a white man. White people are not a group where they're all the same. Muslims are not a group where they're all the same. Same with Jewish people, same with transgender people. Within those groups are lovely people, are okay people, and are right freaking horrible people. But we're not allowed to make that distinction. Because if we were, political correctness would collapse, because it's based on groups, and it's based on groups in a particular hierarchy of victimhood. We are now in a situation where self-identity within the politically correct hierarchy, self-identity is not coming from awareness that we are. It's not coming from anything that we are or could be. It's coming from our perceived scale of victimhood. Who is the biggest victim here? And if you perceive yourself as a victim, on the not the esoteric out there level, on the basis of pure physics, your perceptions are a frequency. Whatever they are, they have a particular frequency. You change your perceptions, you change your frequency. That's why the auric field is constantly changing color with the frequency changes of changing perception, changing thought, changing emotion. Therefore, what you connect with in the pool of quantum possibility and probability is connected to the frequency band of perception that you're giving off. And this is why your perceptions invariably become a self-fulfilling prophecy. And so if you can manipulate people, for instance, into a sense of being a victim, they will manifest confirmations of their victimhood. And therefore, once they're in a sense of victimhood, they're in a sense of powerlessness. So controlling perception literally dictates our reality. There'll be people watching this program who've been through some kind of what's called spiritual awakening. And what is a spiritual awakening? It's changing your perceptions, which changes the frequency you're operating on. And what will those people have experienced? As we all have. They will experience their life changing. They will experience the synchronicity of their life changing and becoming more blatant and more tangible. They'll experience their opportunities, the people they interact with, locations, many different things will change as a result of that perceptual change that we call spiritual awakening. Why? Because they're now interacting with the infinite possibility probability on a higher frequency, but a much more expanded one. Therefore, the opportunity for far more detail and range of experience comes into play. In the same way, if you hold on the same perceptions and you interact with this infinite possibility probability quantum field on the same level, you'll go through your entire life, nothing will basically change. You'll say to people, nothing ever happens in my life, it's ever so boring, nothing ever happens. Well, yeah, but you're interacting with possibility there the size of a pea, mate. Expand your awareness, your infinite awareness. All that is, has been, and ever can be. Oh, am I really? Oh, look what's happening in my life now. So what you're having with this victimhood, political correctness, because the purveyors of political correctness are as much, if not more, the victims of political correctness than those they're trying to silence. You're trying to squeeze their range of the possible into a sense of victimhood, where they're frightened of everything. And when you're frightened of everything, what do? What does anyone in fear do? They look outside of themselves for what they think can protect them from what they've been manipulated to fear. So where do people in states of victimhood look for? Where do they look? They look at the system, big brother, big sister, to protect them from what they've been manipulated to fear. We're looking at a colossal psychological program, which we laughingly call human life. And the world is as it is because this force has hijacked human perception, which through that has dictated human society. And this is fantastic, fantastic news. Because if our perceptions are creating this world we'd rather it be not be, then changing our perceptions will create a different world and bring this one down. No fighting, no waving banners and hate on your face, challenging hatred. None of it. We change our perceptions, we change the world. And it's purely physics in the end. It's there for the taking.
See, that's where I think that like these young people that are dealing with Bitcoin, who think the governments, that people will just stop dealing with the governments and even stop dealing with the media, and that there will be a new decentralized financial system that will pull the rug out from under the people that are benefiting from the current financial system. And maybe that's exactly what you're talking about. Their perceptions on that crypto world is different. They're optimistic. They've got a technology that they believe is a game changer, and maybe it will be.
Oh, maybe it won't. But let's look at it from this point of view. You can try to change this world in the world that it appears to be. None of this exists. The world that we're looking at now, this studio, none of it exists in this form, except in a few centimeters of the brain, which decodes visual reality. In its prime form, this is waveform information. It only becomes holographic, illusory, physical when it's decoded. So in effect, what we're looking at is a movie screen, right? So you want to change a movie. You don't like what's the movie on the screen. What do? Do you get on the movie theater stage and wave a banner at the screen and demand that it changes? Ain't going to change. Because you're trying to change the movie once it's a done deal. If this is an expression of perception, we need to change the real on the projector, and the projector is human perception. So you can talk about Bitcoin, you can talk about this, you can talk about that, you can talk about that, but if that's the starting point, you're trying to change the movie in the movie. What about we change perception of self more than anything else? And from that changed perception, this world takes care of itself.
Okay.
This world takes care of itself. What needs to happen to reflect the new perception in the holographic experience will happen.
So
because the real's been changed.
We got 5 or 10 minutes left, and I'm glad we're getting to this point because. So what does that mean? So you're talking now about a solution, right? Mm-hmm. Changing your perception.
Yeah.
And I think it would be great to leave people with a solution that they can maybe try applying themselves. But what does that mean, like really? What does that mean for people watching this, like to change their perceptions? What does that mean? What do they have to do?
Well, the last thing I'm going to do is tell people what they have to do. That's the old way. I can talk about concepts, but people have to make their own choices about what they do. Otherwise, it's someone else sitting cross-legged on a mountain telling people what to do. I'm not going to do that. What I will talk about is my own personal experience and the experience of those who have been through the same thing. You know, one of the great ways that true transformation is stopped is by making it seem so complex. I remember I went to India once. I just wanted to see it. And I was in this Indian temple. And I've got arthritis in my knees and arthritis in me wherever. And they're all sitting on the ground in the lotus position. I actually took my fold-up garden chair from England because I knew I was going on the plane. Because I knew I was going I'll be in these temples, and I knew they'd be in the lotus position, sitting on the ground. There wouldn't be any chairs, so I took my own. So I'm sitting there, and around me are all these people in the lotus position, and I'm sitting in my garden chair in the middle of this temple floor, right? Now, those people in the lotus position and me in my garden chair, are they more connected? Are they more connected to what they want to connect with than I am in my garden chair? No, because they're thinking body, lotus position, body. I'm thinking consciousness, for which the body's just a vehicle. And everything is made to sound more complicated and complex. And this is one of the things that happens. The more complicated things can sound, the more power people have who people think, well, you understand it and I don't. Therefore, you have power. If we're trying to empower people, then we don't hold things back or put it in a way that makes us seem as if we know it all and you don't, therefore you've got to look up to me. We realize that we're all expressions of the same consciousness. So therefore what you're trying to do is help people or give people your own experience so that they can do it themselves, not do it through you. And the point is that all these complications, oh, you've got to go on this fast, and then there's this, then you go in that. I say, be my guest. But it won't make any difference unless one thing changes, and one thing that's real simple. A re-evaluation of self-identity. What is this I we talk about? For most people, I is what they see in the mirror. It's the color of their skin. It's their life story. It's their job. What do? You meet someone. Hello, nice to meet you. Who are you? And they'll give you their name. They'll give you their job. They'll give you their life story. They'll give you where they come from. These are all experiences. They're not the I. The I is awareness, consciousness. And if you perceive as what I call a phantom self, you confuse experience with who you are, then that experience is on a very, very low frequency compared with expanded awareness, and has a very, very narrow perception of itself. What a phantom self can see, which is basically five-sense self, it can see nothing but limitation. Because although this world is not solid, quantum physics has shown that, but we experience as such for reasons that can be explained. It seems that everything is so limited, everything is so I can't. And thus you are living your life in a perception of little me. And through the interaction with infinite possibility probability, you live an entire life as little me. You are Ethel in the checkout until AI takes over. You're Ethel in the checkout. Oh, good morning. Oh, I'm Ethel. I work in the checkout. No, no. You are all that is, has been, and ever can be. They've just persuaded you to self-identify with Ethel in the checkout at the checkout. And when you then move, this is where I'm going. You move your sense of who you are from I am Ethel in the checkout to I am all that is, has been, and ever can be. And the only thing that limits my expansion into infinite forever is my sense of limitation, which is completely changeable by yourself. Then everything starts to change. then your life starts to become synchronistic. Then you lose the fears and the anxieties, and you lose the I can'ts. And because the point from which you create your reality has changed, your reality cannot do anything but change. You change the reel on that projector, that movie is got to change. It's got no choice. This is where the change takes place. And this is why the system has systematically, appropriately, suppressed throughout known human history those people who have talked about the fact that we are consciousness having an experience. What did the British Empire do when it, as the shamans have told me, when they went into the countries and colonialized them? They targeted the shaman. They targeted the carriers of the knowledge. They targeted people who are out there. Why do they demonize and ridicule the idea of senses beyond the five? Ridicule the idea of anything existing in terms of life as we understand it outside of the human realm. Oh, he thinks there's other people other than humans in the vastness of forever. See all those lights in the night sky? He thinks there's someone else out there. He'll believe in little green men soon, right? Why? It's all suppressing our sense of reality and making it as small as possible. And it's because they know that if we change our sense of self-identity, we will change the world. Our world and collectively the world as we perceive it. And so if you look at it, anything that would get people to expand their sense of the possible, like, for instance, extraterrestrial life actually being confirmed to exist. I mean, anyone with half a brain cell on active duty looks at the night sky and says, don't be so stupid. Of course it does. But the system is, oh, no. Because if we, even on that level, had a widespread acceptance that non-human life existed, our sense of the possible starts to do that. They don't want that. Everything is to hold us there. For instance, the education system is completely structured to hold people there and keep them there for a lifetime. And so what I'm saying is it's not complicated. It's not complex. It's not going on a correspondence course. It's changing our perception of self, and everything else comes from that. And we can do that now. Now. Not tomorrow, now we can do that. And then watch it. I'll say this to people. I've said this in this new book. Just try it. Say for 2 months. Interact with the world, interact with everything you need to keep confirming to yourself because it's easy to forget. Just interact with the world. Day by day, minute by minute, from a point of view of I am infinite awareness having this experience. This name, this life story, this is an experience that I, infinite awareness, is having. And for 2 months, try it out. No gurus necessary. Try it out and see how life changes and see how your experience changes and how you interact with other people in different ways.
That's awesome. So I think we're just about out of time here, but I just want to get, it's great that we're leaving people with that, something they can do and they can take away from this. Guy, do you want to just say something or add to what David has said here to wrap this up?
Self-identity, that's it. Who am I? I am not this body with this color or this diploma or my mother or whoever. Yeah. We are infinite love. This is who we really are. And this perception, you've talked about the perception. Yeah. Consciousness is the perception of reality. What is reality? is who we really are. That's it.
Okay.
It's-
Fantastic. And we're going to get into it more tomorrow because you're going to come back and we're going to have a big, long interview with you tomorrow. So let's just kind of wrap this up. But David, what do you got the new book that you just wrote? Sounds good. Do you want to tell people what it's called or when they might be able to get their hands on it?
It'll be available in November. It's called Everything You Need to Know But Have Never Been Told. And that doesn't mean everything you need to know, every last detail. It means everything you need to know to see the world from a completely different perspective. And from that perspective, you'll start to see it yourself.
Fantastic. Sounds like it'll be a perfect thing to get your hands on after this interview here today. And I know you're speaking in Toronto this weekend. Are tickets still available?
No, all gone. Because, you know, as I've been going around on this world tour, it doesn't get on the TV news. It doesn't get in the national newspapers. People are waking up, and they're waking up. They're quietly waking up. They're quietly starting to assess all the norms they were told to believe in. Of course, it's not the majority, but I've been on this, like this lovely lady. I've been on this road a long time, and when I look at what it was like nearly 30 years ago when I started out, in terms of people looking at this stuff, the change has been fantastic. It's been a real barometer for me to see where people are at, literally all around the world. And then I'm going to Vancouver next week, and I'm going to speak there, and then I'm going home, and I'll cause some trouble there, I suppose.
Fantastic. I think just one of the examples of how things have changed is when you see those YouTube videos of those BBC journalists and you interacting, or those Australian broadcasters that I've seen, and it's so obvious that they're just trying to discredit you.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I would find it hard to believe that anybody wouldn't see through exactly what's going on there. So I just...
Well, you know, if you program a computer to decode information and put it on the screen in a certain way, in a certain limitation, that computer will take whatever information you give it, will only decode the information it's been programmed to decode, and will put that on the screen. I feel for these people, right? And once you reach the point where you realize you are infinite awareness having an experience, whether people like you or don't like you, whether they shout abuse at you or whatever, it's all the same, because it's just an experience, and there'll be another one along tomorrow.
Okay, great. I just want to say thanks for coming down
Thanks
today.
I've really enjoyed it.
And best of luck in Vancouver.
Thank
and
you.
then back home again.
Back home again.
And thanks, Guy and Bridget, for helping us set this all up. So we'll see everybody next time right here on thatchannel.com. Bye for now.